Alright guys, so in this video, I am going to be speculating on the next potential big time disaster that has to do with cruise ships, possibly one of the mega big time cruise ships like the Royal Caribbean cruise ships. You know, what happens if one of those ships gets nailed by a rogue wave? Because it almost seems like at some point, based on all these cruises that have been happening, the Icon of the Seas, the massive ship coming out in 2024, it does seem like it is inevitable at some point a cruise ship will get nailed by a rogue wave, which is completely unpredictable. Will it be able to survive it? And really, what happens after that when it comes to the cruise ship industry? It is very rare for a cruise ship to sink. In the last 100 years, only 22 have sunk, and some of those sinkings were with no passengers on board. Of course, a lot of us remembering the Costa Concordia debacle that happened about 11 years ago. That situation was due to negligence of the crew, but I just want to talk about, are we ever going to see another Titanic type situation where we get one of these huge cruise ships because they go everywhere, they're constantly traveling? What is the scenario where one of these things sinks? It's obviously not going to happen like the Titanic. It's not going to hit an iceberg. We've got the radar. We can detect it miles away. Even if it does hit an iceberg, you know, with the way the ships are built nowadays, it would not puncture the ship. In my opinion, at this point, when you look at the massive cruise ships, I'm not talking about like a yacht sinking or even like a smaller one. We're talking about like the Oasis of the Seas, the Symphony of the Seas, the Icon of the Seas, any of those. The only way, in my estimation, one of those could sink, it's from a rogue wave that would probably have to at least be 75 feet high to cause enough damage to completely capsize it. If a rogue wave does capsize a ship like we saw in Poseidon, it would be completely catastrophic. Nobody is surviving. It would be one of the worst disasters we've ever seen. And the main issue, because you wonder, we've got crazy technology now. Everyone thinks they're untouchable when they're on a cruise ship. How does something like this happen? Rogue waves are completely unpredictable. The tallest one that I've ever heard of happened off the coast of Norway, 84 feet high. There have been record rogue waves in the Gulf of Mexico, Northern Pacific, the Mediterranean, and off the coast of Newfoundland. Now, there's a lot of different reasons that rogue waves happen, but one of the main causes is strong current running in the opposite direction of tidal waves. But there are a lot of different random causes of these, and I think that's the scariest part. You look at a tsunami, you look at a tidal wave, you understand them a little bit more. Rogue waves, there's so much cloudiness when it comes to the science behind them. No matter what you look up, you'll find the exact same thing. Well, it might be caused by this, but then there's also this. It might be caused by that, but then there's also this. We don't really know. They're completely random, and I think if the wrong ship is in the wrong place at the wrong time, we could get a devastating result. I'm not saying don't go on cruise ships, but I will say some of these cruise ships that they're making, there's a big incentive with cruise ships nowadays to fit as much crap on them as humanly possible. That could create a big problem when it comes to withstanding a massive force of water. If you actually Google and look up some of the cruise ships that get stuck in these storms, and again, when I say this, I'm talking about the Royal Caribbean ones, because that's what we're really talking about. We're not talking about dinky yachts or smaller ships. When you're talking about like the actual cruise ships, like the Costa Concordia, any of those type of cruise lines, I've seen videos of cruise ships to where furniture will get thrown around, the ship will get completely rocked, there'll be windows that break, and that's just off of a small storm. Imagine what would happen if you bang a massive 75 or 80 foot wave into the side of a ship. It would be not pretty, and at worst it would be completely catastrophic if it fully did capsize. Maybe it's able to withstand it. You know, if it did, I'm sure a few people would die just from the impact of the wave. It depends how big it is. It would be interesting to see how one of these big cruise ships would be able to handle around a 50-foot wave, because I do have confidence they would be able to remain upright if they're big enough. A lot of them are just ridiculous at this point. I mean, we're talking about these things weighing 5 to 6 times more than the Titanic. It is completely out of control. It's unbelievable. Yes, they're way safer. Of course they are, because we've got modern building technology, but that still doesn't resolve the idea of a random situation happening, because remember, with the Titanic, it was really less than a 0.1% chance. When it comes to that disaster, it had to be the perfect weather with no moon, with no chop, and everything came together. It would be like the same thing with a rogue wave if something like that ended up happening. So when it comes to a future disaster involving a cruise ship, I do think because of how safe they are right now, the number one cause would actually be a bad crew, and that's what happened to the Costa Concordia. But like a sinking of a cruise ship, it's never going to happen like the Titanic to where it takes 2 or 3 hours to sink. It just cannot. Cruise ships are not going to get punctured unless you hit it with some type of missile or something. Otherwise, it would have to be a rogue wave. It would have to be an instant thing to where it would completely flip over and completely capsize, and then it would probably stay there for a few hours as it floods, creating this giant air bubble, but there would be no way out of it because the sides of it would all be water. That's kind of like the horror scenario that we saw in Poseidon that could happen to a cruise ship if it is a worst case scenario and it is a 1 in a million and a rogue wave does get big enough to where it does nail it. According to this article, only 6 cruise ships have ever been struck by a rogue wave, with a recent one happening in December of 2022 on the Viking Polaris, where one person did die, but it was not a very strong or big wave. And then, of course, when it comes to rogue waves, I also saw speculation in articles they would be able to detect them, and you want to turn the ship into the wave. It's kind of like the Great Titanic debate. Do you want to hit the iceberg head on? That's another story for another day. The human mind, when you see something, you want to get away from it, especially in the Titanic's case, brand new ship. If you can avoid it, you would want to do it. So I think that's kind of a false equivalency, the idea of, oh, you should just ram directly into the iceberg. It's easy to say now, but really, it was just a perfect chain of events. You've got a brand new state-of-the-art ship that cost a lot of money. You want to get that thing away from the iceberg, not ram it directly into it. And then when it comes to like a rogue wave, yes, you want to be in line directly with it to where the front of the bow takes the brunt. You just don't want it to come up on the side, because then it's going to roll over and possibly partially capsize like the Costa Concordia, or fully capsize like Poseidon. But that is just kind of my speculation on a potential disaster that could be happening to a cruise ship with how big they're getting right now. I understand they're very safe. I get it. But anytime I do some research on rogue waves, it's just so surprising with how much we know now. They're so unpredictable, they're impossible. But then you've got these cruise lines, they do 50 cruises a year, they're pushing them out, they're investing so much money into these ships. And I'm guessing it's going to be a wrong place, wrong time for one of these cruise ships at some point. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.